Sports, your Commonwealth Games network.
He was bought at a New Zealand yearling sale in 1927 for 160 guineas and shipped to Australia. The horse was a freak, winning by margins ranging from 10 to 30 lengths.
But Reveille Boy can't take it. Farlap was only loafing.
But this is the skeleton of the great horse. It's all that's left of Farlap here in New Zealand. Its hide has been stuffed and is now in Melbourne. And his great heart is in the Institute of Anatomy in Canberra. And make no bones about it, it's much like the story of other successful Kiwis. They're scattered to the four winds of the earth. The names of many New Zealand cartoonists are familiar here and elsewhere. Names like Murray Ball, Peter Bromhead, Unk White and Alan Moyer.
Next year we'll hear a lot more about New Zealand and probably amalgamation and all the rest of it. But I'd like to, my idea of the new Australasia, when it comes about, we have the present Australia here. This is the North Island, South Island, and West Island. And I think, to be fair, I think the capital should be around about halfway, about there.
The creator of Footrot Flats, Murray Ball, is one who has stayed at home on his North Island farm and has still been successful. His work is syndicated through more than 100 newspapers, and there have been millions of books sold, as well as a movie made. Success like that is easy to explain, according to another who has made his mark, Peter Bromhead.
And my theory is that New Zealanders are so isolated, they never know whether they're winning or losing, so they keep running very fast to make sure that they're out there, but they don't really know where they are. They always feel they're losing, when in fact they may be miles ahead of people.
I don't know what I'd expected, what I'd hoped for at the time I returned. Some sort of edge to the life that I lead, some sort of feeling that their death was worthwhile.
Sam Neill is a New Zealander. You might have confused him for an Australian.
He's a highly intelligent actor, and he had a great deal of experience in film before he ever left New Zealand. He'd done a lot of work in film on both sides of the camera, and so when he became well known first over here, he actually already knew a great deal about what he was doing, and of course he looks very like me, which is always an advantage on screen.
Just a jump to the left. Put your hands on your hips.
Richard O'Brien, the writer of that show, is a rather warped and wonderful New Zealander, and I don't know where the idea from that came from, but I can only imagine that there was something very funny in the water in the town that he came from. There aren't very many countries in the world, I suspect, where an ex-Prime Minister would appear on the stage in a bizarre entertainment. I thought that was a very interesting thing for him to have done. Much more interesting than almost anything else he ever did, incidentally.
That's right. He didn't have to put any makeup on. He was a vampire.
Jenny Morris is the latest in a long line of successful Kiwi entertainers. MTV's Richard Wilkins, himself an expatriate, has been a keen observer.
They've been coming here for years. I mean, it's not just a recent phenomenon. You just have to cast your mind back to the 60s. People like Diana Lee and Johnny Devlin, Max Merritt and the Medias, Ray Columbus and the Invaders. And of course, in the 70s, there was the big boom with 70s and 80s with Dragon and Mysex, and there's various members of other bands, lots of bands who are in fact Kiwis. You know, there's a Kiwi in the Angels, Couple and Mental as Anything. John Stevens, of course, the singer with Noiseworks, is a Kiwi. Sharon O'Neill, the Finn brothers in Split Enz were probably the guys who really took New Zealand music in a big way to the world.
I've never been able to put my finger on it, what the difference is between New Zealand bands and Australian bands. There is a difference.
I think New Zealanders are a bit more, New Zealand bands are often a bit more snobby, actually. They come over here and they've got this sort of thing that Australian, that they can really show the Australian bands, you know. And it's probably a bit of a defence mechanism. But maybe that does give them a bit more resolve or something. It's only natural anyway that bands should come across from there. It's the closest port of call, you know. And
Not
to be the
New
odd.
Zealand.
No.
You can't survive there. It's hopeless.
The only place to play in New Zealand, I mean, you know, this was, you had to play a whole lot of songs, a whole lot of covers, so when you came over here, you're actually quite a good band, you know. So I guess that's carried through, and I think it's characteristic of most New Zealanders. When they get out of the country, they just go, great, I'll have that. And they really try, they don't know where to stop. And they've got nothing to stop for, you know. What do they do, go home? It's kind of desperation, I guess.
I mean, you usually give up quite a lot when you come over, and when you give up contact with family, perhaps, you give up the ground that you're so familiar with, and you have to try really hard to make it work because there's so much at stake.
So we've had over the years very distinguished New Zealanders. The latest crop would be Kiri Te Kanawa in the pop music area, Neil and Tim Finn, Crowded House. We've had Ricky May, who died in Sydney. We've had people who have been entertainers, top of the tree stuff, mostly with a limited South Pacific audience, but a few internationals. And those internationals, Donald McIntyre, Kiri Te Kanawa, done extremely well.
Does it disturb you that most of them have to leave New Zealand, though, to really achieve their success?
No, it doesn't. Otherwise, we'd have to listen to opera every night.
UV Triple Guard gives three-way protection.
Perhaps that goes some of the way to explaining why Kiwis seem so well prepared to take on the world when they leave their own shores.
On your marks.
This is a small semi-rural community on the outskirts of Auckland called Beachlands. It's like many others around New Zealand where they start at an early age. It seems that almost every kid in the neighbourhood is here, no matter how old.
I want you to hold form, get up tall, think of two things, high knees, keep him tall, straight out down there, nice and fast and relaxed, all right?
Unobtrusively working with some of the older boys is a fit 72-year-old, a man who's trained runners like Peter Snell and Murray Halberg. He's the patriarch of New Zealand athletics, Arthur Lydiard.
Arthur Lydiard's approach was always that people who run 4-minute miles are just like you and me, only they run 4-minute miles. This is a very New Zealand thing to say to people, and it tended to work.
You know, kids like to run, jump and throw things. And it only takes a few adults to organise them, and they're engaged in healthy pastimes. I always say that you can get a street of kids, and if no one takes the interest in them, they'll get into trouble. Only takes one guy to say, look, let's have a game of cricket or something, and we've got everyone involved in a healthy pastime. This is a little community here, and the local coach out here, Lloyd Harwood, he spends a lot of time with the kids. He'll be over there now. He gets all the kids training and spends a lot of time with them. And he asked me would I take on the older runners about 3 years ago. And of course, in a small community, you try to help each other.
Amongst this group are 3 boys who have shown promise over middle distances. Lydiard has worked with them for a few years and has prepared them for the New Zealand Secondary School Championships.
You've got to work like a sprinter. A lot of distance runners make the mistake of doing a lot of long work, do a lot of anaerobic work, repetitions, but they don't work on the speed like a sprinter. And you've got to be fast these days, as the applicants show you.
The venue for the championships is Auckland's Mount Smart Stadium, and it's here that the Commonwealth Games track and field events will be staged. Lydiard's boys meet expectations, all recording top 3 finishes. However, they all know that the track ahead is long and hard if they too are to become champions and represent their country in future Commonwealth Games. The Lydiard approach is original. He's a maverick who bucked the system and won. His community spirit promotes intense loyalty amongst his charges, and he inspires by example. Arthur Lydiard epitomises much of what has made so many New Zealanders successful.
Well, we arrived in New Zealand. I remember we went down to breakfast the first morning, and the 2 ladies wouldn't let us all sit together. I was with a group called Cambridge Circus with Tim Brooke Taylor and Bill Oddie and Humphrey Barclay and David Hatch. And so they said, would you sit over here, please, because you're in room number 1? They sat us one at a table all around the room, so we had to sit and sort of shout to each other across the room. And they brought the menu and showed us the menu. And the first 3 sections with little lines across. And the first section said, porridge or cremota. So I said, oh, what's the cremota? And she said, it's porridge. So I said, Oh, well, I'll have the porridge. Then it said fruit or prunes. And I said to her, what's the fruit? And she said, prunes. So I said, well, I think I'll have the prunes then. And we went through the menu like this. And I remember after we'd been there a week and we had to get on the plane to go up to Auckland, she said, how'd you enjoy your stay? And we said, very much indeed. And she said, oh, good. She said, I hope you like New Zealand. We're a happy-go-lucky people.
New Zealand is a delightful country, a beautiful country, very fascinating. They're going to make a great success of it. There's not a shadow of a doubt in my mind. Don't you worry about that.
Do you think we should do it in the horse racing commentary voice?
This has been another presentation from Nine's Wide World of Sports.